The Deadmines is one of the earliest dungeons that players encounter as they level up in World of Warcraft. The location is as old as the Warcraft franchise itself, so whether or not it is from the classic dungeon, the revamped version, or maybe even the RTS game, it is very likely that every Warcraft player has experienced the Deadmines in some way. In this video, we will go back and see how this place has evolved through time. Enjoy! The Deadmines were once the greatest gold production center in the human lands. However, it was abandoned during the First War, and in Warcraft 1 we actually venture into the mines 2 times, once during the human campaign and then another time as the orcs. In the human storyline, we get ordered by King Llane himself to go inside the mines and save Sir Lothar, who has been missing for 20 months after searching for the Tome of Divinity.
It has been some 20 months since Sir Lothar, one of the Crown's greatest heroes, led an expedition into the Deadmines to search for the lost Tome of Divinity. They were never heard from again. However, the Great Knight has recently appeared to the Abbot of Northshire in a vision, battered and pleading for assistance. King Llane has ordered you to lead a detachment of warriors and healers into the mines in an attempt to find Sir Lothar, heal him, and bring him and any other survivors back alive.
In this mission, you get to lead a band of forces through a mineshaft in the Deadmines, and throughout the mission you find wounded soldiers that you heal up to use as reinforcements, and eventually you come across Sir Lothar. To finish the mission, you simply have to heal him up and then bring him back to safety.
You are wakened from your night's sleep by a runner from the war chief. Blackhand's daughter Griselda has run off with the outlaw Tudok's band of ogres. Our wolf riders have tracked them to the dungeons hidden beneath the Deadmines. Find Tudok's band of rebellious pigs and kill them all, including Griselda. She must not disobey the commands of her father, ever again.
So the orc mission is a bit more gruesome. Here we are not getting sent in on any rescue mission. Instead, Blackhand wants us to find his daughter, who has been running away with a band of outlaw ogres. But he doesn't want us to bring her back so that he can talk sense into her. Instead, he wants us to kill her right there on the spot. That's some good parenting right there. Good job, Blackhand. I can't imagine why she ran away in the first place. There is a lot we don't know about WoW's early development, but one thing we know is that the zones around Stormwind, Elwyn Forest, Westfall, Duskwood, they are some of the areas which were completed earliest in WoW's development. Gameplay videos from the E3 conference in 2002 shows how far they had come already. This footage shows a dwarf going into Moonbrook, and as you can see, the area really hasn't changed much from then to now. The dwarf also continues into the Defias hideout, which confirms that already in 2002, the passageway leading into the Deadmines was in place. And it seems the Defias Brotherhood had already made the mines their base of operations, because in the footage we can see the dwarf get attacked by an NPC wearing a red mask. The mob is named Highwayman, similar to the Defias Highwayman, which would later become an enemy you fight in Westfall. So the Deadmines was finished so early in WoW's development, there really isn't any old game files we can dig up where the place had a vastly different design. The Friends and Family Alpha 0.5.3, which is the earliest leaked version of WoW, already has the design of Deadmines we know today. However, there is another place we can find a very interesting piece of the dungeon's history. In the Blizzard Campus Museum, there's a display of pictures from early WoW development, dating back way before the game versions that we have access to. These pictures were also shared by Blizzard's Dave Wilson on Twitter, and one of them shows the Juggernaut in the environment it was originally meant to be placed in. As you can see, the entire area was meant to be outside, but it was later moved into the cavern we can find it in today. As I said before, in the early game files that we have access to, the Deadmines dungeon was basically finished. However, there was one strange update made to it when the game went from beta to live. As you probably already know, there is this small area on the map file but outside the playable area of the Deadmines. It is often referred to as the Outland testing area because it has assets from the original Outland zone which was never implemented. This was not there during development and only added just before the game's release. The actual purpose of the area is unknown, whether or not it is a leftover from some testing, or perhaps it's a time capsule to preserve some assets from a continent they knew they were going to scrap. Whatever the purpose was, I just find it interesting that they added it there so late in development and then left it there even up to today. So now we know a bit about the history and early development of the Deadmines, let's move on to look at the original version which existed in the game from vanilla up until the Cataclysm revamp. The tunnels leading into the instance used to be quite dangerous. Guarded by Defias diggers, henchmen and conjurers, you really didn't want to venture through here alone. In addition to the usual mobs, you also had the 3 rare spawns, Marissa Dupay, a brainwashed noble and Foreman Tistelnettle. These all still exist today, but their level and difficulty has been decreased, abilities and appearances have been tweaked, and the quest O Brother, which was connected to Foreman Tistelnettle, has been removed. Inside the instance, you first had to deal with Defias miners, overseers and evokers, and the first boss you encounter is Raxor. He is an ogre who also is the foreman of Edwin Van Cleef's construction project. There are some speculations that he is one of the survivors of the ogres that were massacred by the orcs during the First War, who came into the Deadmines to kill Griselda. However, there is nothing backing that up except the fact that he is an ogre and he is in the mines, but it's still a speculation worth mentioning. After fighting Raxor, players continued onwards to the mast room. On the way there, sometimes a rare boss spawned, but if it didn't, then Sneed's Shredder was the next encounter. He oversees the construction of the mast for the Juggernaut, and first of all you have to fight him in the Shredder, and when that's done, he will jump out and attack you himself. After Sneed was dead, the mobs would get a bit more difficult. Strip miners, taskmasters and wizards guard the way to the Goblin Foundry. Here, the head melter for Edwin Van Cleef, Gilneas, construct cannonballs for the Juggernaut and experiments with all kinds of crazy goblin technology, all founded by the Kingpin himself. Now, the biggest challenge always used to be getting to the boss rather than killing him, as the goblin craftsmen and goblin engineers that could summon the remote-controlled golems actually made Gilneas seem easy in comparison. After killing him, you could continue through the dungeon, and now everything that stood between you and the Juggernaut was a locked door. You could open this either by using the Defias gunpowder or having a rogue pick the locks. As of patch 1.3, you could also use a small Sephorium charge in order to open it up. When the doors opened, the classic phrase
You there! Check out that noise!
rang through the mines. The shout comes from Mr. Smite, the next boss who is also first mate under Captain Greenskin. We fight him just before entering the Juggernaut in an encounter where he repeatedly stuns us and changes weapons. Now, there is good reason to believe that Mr. Smite actually survived this encounter. Many years later, in Pandaria, we find a Tauren that looks very similar to him, named Yorick Sharpeye. He sits by a small pond in Vale of Eternal Blossoms, and by his side is a treasure chest and a small toy ship. And when we engage him, he says, "You, what are you doing here?" Which indicates that he knows who we are. And despite the fact that it seems that he just wants to be left alone, we can kill him, and sometimes he drops a toy which let us take on the appearance of Mr. Smite. So it's very likely that he survived all the way up to Mists of Pandaria, but then he died for good. There are 3 bosses waiting on the actual Juggernaut. One of them is Cookie, the Murloc who is also the ship's cook. He could be bypassed, but the next one, Captain Greenskin, couldn't. Only after killing him would we be able to fight the Kingpin of the Defias Brotherhood. Edwin Van Cleef was the last boss. We fight him on top of the Juggernaut where we have to bring him and his guards down. And after we have done so, we can take his head and bring it to Gryan Stoutmantle. However, Van Cleef has made a few reappearances after his demise. In Wrath of the Lich King, during the dungeon Trial of the Champion, players have to face off against random memories in the fight against Argent Confessor Paletress, and one of these is the memory of Van Cleef. Furthermore, during WoW's 11th anniversary, players received the exquisite costume set Edwin Van Cleef. It had 50 charges and let players transform into the Defias Kingpin.
None may challenge the Brotherhood.
I think that the original Deadmines is very special to a lot of people. It is something that you generally experience very early on in your WoW career, especially if you play Alliance. Back in the early days, this might very well have been where you got your first blue item, or perhaps even your first item set. The Defias leather set was a combination of green and blue items, which dropped from both bosses and trash mobs. At the start, only the chest piece which dropped from Edwin Van Cleef was blue quality. The belt was later upgraded in patch 2.3, leaving only the boots, gloves and leggings as green trash drops. With the Cataclysm revamp, the set in its entirety was removed. You could no longer go into the Deadmines and farm the entire set. However, the legs and the gloves were left in the game and even received a significant upgrade from uncommon to rare quality. And since the chest piece was the only part of the set which was bind on pickup, you can still to this day find the boots and the belt on the auction house. Although if you want to get your hands on them, be prepared to pay quite a lot of gold. And the removal of the Defias armor set is just one of the many changes implemented with the Cataclysm revamp. And now we will move on and look at the rest. So in Cataclysm, the entire zone of Westfall was updated, and at the same time Deadmines was changed to reflect current events.
So these are going to be level 85 heroic dungeons that you'll be able to do, Deadmines and Shadowfang Keep. And we'll be going back in here. Now they're going to use the art that's existing now, but we're going to do new fights, new creatures, new abilities, and it's basically going to be right where you expect a heroic level 85 dungeon to be.
Pain cleavier than ever before.
And the statement during that announcement, Van Cleefier than ever before, led to the speculation that Edwin Van Cleef was going to make his return. However, this never happened. Instead, we got introduced to his daughter, Vanessa Van Cleef, as we went through the new quests in Westfall. The Deadmines now had a normal and a heroic difficulty. The normal one was targeted for level 15 to 21 players, while the heroic one was targeted to level 85. The road into the actual dungeon no longer posed a threat to players. Instead of hostile Defias guards, we will now find homeless citizens of Stormwind. There will be one or two thugs as well, but nothing that even comes close to the danger that the tunnels had before the revamp. Inside the dungeon, you will notice one big difference between this revamp and many others. Instead of changing the layout of the dungeon, the revamped Deadmines look the same. However, all the mobs and encounters have been changed, and a teleporter has been placed at the start of the instance to help wipe recovery. So after fighting our way through a group of kobolds and an ogre henchman, we arrive at the first boss encounter. Just like before, it is an ogre with the title of Foreman, but instead of Raxor, it is the ogre magi Glubtok. After he is defeated, the tunnel to the master room is now populated by goblin overseers, mine bunnies, mining monkeys and oath lackeys. In the mast room, a goblin overseer has once again been put in charge to construct the mast for the Juggernaut. Sneed's successor is called Helix Gearbreaker, and he is a goblin rogue with a fear of the dark. Instead of operating a shredder, Helix is riding atop of a lumbering oaf, and just like Sneed, we have to fight him in two phases, one where he is riding and one where he is not. Towards the Goblin Foundry, we have to fight Defias Evokers, Miners and Diggers. In the Foundry, the next boss is called Foe Reaper 5000. It is an upgraded version of the Foe Reaper 4000, modified to be able to cut through the Stormwind's armored soldiers like a scythe through wheat. After fighting him, you make your way through the tunnel to the Ironclad Cove, just like before, with the exception that you no longer need the Defias gunpowder to use the cannon. There is also no boss trying to stop you from getting on board the Juggernaut. Instead, they are bombarding you with the cannons from the ship, and you have to avoid the attacks while getting over there, otherwise you will be knocked off the bridge. On board the ship, the next boss is Admiral Ripsnarl, formerly known as James Harrington. During the Westfall storyline, we find him in stocks at Sentinel Hill, and he gets freed by Vanessa Van Cleef so that he can command the Juggernaut. The next boss is none other than Cookie. He has proclaimed himself captain of the Juggernaut following Captain Greenskin's death. He still performs his official duties as the chef, but anyone who questions the validity of his captain title has been known to come down with a severe case of food poisoning. If you play the Deadmines on normal difficulty, Captain Cookie is the last boss. However, if we play heroic, we also get to fight Vanessa Van Cleef herself. As a young girl, she witnessed the gruesome death of her father as we beheaded him on the Juggernaut. She has since taken up the mantle of leadership and has been busy plotting the revenge on Stormwind. In the fight against her, she poisons our minds, and we get to battle our way through our own hallucinations from the Goblin Foundry back to the Juggernaut. And this is a very impressive encounter indeed, which, at least visually, makes every other encounter in this version or the original one to pale in comparison. And if the road back to the ship wasn't enough, when we get back, Vanessa has planted explosives all around the deck, and we have to swing to safety several times to avoid getting incinerated. At 1% health, our drugged minds witness Vanessa commit suicide by blowing herself up. However, as we learn in Legion, she survived this and became a member of the secretive order the Uncrowned. Now, Rogues will be able to recruit her as one of their champion followers. So, throughout the years, Deadmines has changed quite a lot, while still staying true to its roots. The layout is still the same, and the encounters, while different, still give several nods to what used to be. While I have so many fond memories of the original Deadmines and I do miss it, I still think this is a revamp that really honors what it used to be, in opposed to other revamps where I personally think they have failed to achieve this. But let me know what you think down below. The Deadmines is a very special place to me, so I'm interested to hear everything you have to say about it. And as usual, if you liked the video, do give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be back with more stuff very soon. But until then, take care.